Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to briefly and step by step go over the final paper, which is the response to intervention assignment. It is a research type of assignment where you're gathering data on how you're going to address a specific behavior. So what I'm going to do is read what is on a syllabus, the narrative part, and then part 1 and part 2. I just wanted to also let you know and help you understand that with completion of this assignment, particular knowledge and skills, it will help you be able to identify behaviors, help you better understand how to, what is an intervention, and it has to be something that is measurable, not just, I would like to try this, but it's based upon facts. Not, it's more objective, not subjective, and it's to ensure ethically we don't project or paternalize with our client system, no matter what it may do. I also want to encourage you that there is a writing lab that you may utilize. You can find that resource on the website, and I will find it and put it in a module. Also, when you write, although you think subjectively, you always have to write objectively. You have to write in a way that you think the reader does not understand. And when you complete an assignment, you always do it based upon what is the criteria in the syllabus. Part of this, it talks about a tiered approach, which there is a video under the module for the response to intervention assignment. So just wanted to, put those things out there. So now I'm going to start reading. So forgive me if I'm not looking directly at the camera because I'm reading from the screen. It says the student will examine a topic using critical thinking skills and consider all aspects of the issue. So whatever issue you may look to measure, I'm briefly going to try and give you some examples around the issue of attendance. That may be a social work practice issue. It may not, depending on the building administrator and what duties or tasks that they may give you. If the student is homeless, of course, that is a social work practice issue, but when we think about attendance. After conducting a comprehensive literature review. Now, literature review is something you look at articles based upon your topic, and you look at what has been done, what has not been done. It may help you identify interventions, what particular setting this has happened in, how it was addressed. Is it mostly with females? Is it with males? Is it mostly with high school students, middle school students, elementary, or middle school, kindergarten students, pre-K students have attendance issues, something with the parents. So when you think about that, or behavioral issues, if it's co-occurring or comorbid with something else, your literature review will give you the available information and what is being said about that particular topic on a professional level. So it's not you just saying something, it's you also finding information to support what you are doing. After completing the rationale for using the identified intervention for the identified area of need, the student will complete a fictitious graphic display of data showing how the intervention will be monitored through the RTI model. So what that RTI model is also a single subject design. Hopefully you have taken a research class by now. I know undergraduate you did. So single subject design can be ABC or ABA. So you gather your baseline data, and that's most of the time what has been reported to you. So that's the A. The B is the intervention that you do. C can be another intervention, or A is where you return back to your baseline. So when you think about that, when you do your interventions, your baseline, your intervention, your second intervention, or you return back to the baseline. Depending on what the baseline is, you may want some things to go up, or you may want some things to go down. It depends. If we're talking about attendance issues, we want an increase in attendance. If we're talking about someone hitting another, we want a decrease in that particular type of behavior. The student will also attempt to identify from the data collected what tier the student would fall in prior to and after the intervention. So that's helping you to also make a projection. So this student is having this particular type of problem. They are at this tier level. After this intervention is done, it is expected they will be at this tier level. So if that, you always want to see a change in that, because that also helps to determine the effectiveness of your intervention. An RTI model, response to intervention model, is a system of monitoring student academic success through the use of single subject assessment, which I told you that's a research design, collect student information in baseline without intervention, identify an intervention to use, implement the intervention, and continue data collection, graphing data while in the intervention. So you could determine the effectiveness of it, when it was effective, if it's a time of day type, week, year, that's when you think about that. If success is not noted in intervention, then the intervention is changed or modified, and data collection is continued until success is noted. So it's also kind of continual assessment and evaluation process to determine the effectiveness of the intervention. The RTI model is now being utilized for behavioral needs of students, not just academic needs. And it talks about the new school social work standards include RTI model for social behavior needs of students. The paper must be typed, APA format, not to exceed 8 pages with a 12-point font. This does not include the reference page and or sample intervention handouts. Now, your references, anything that you cite, wherever you get information from, you are to have a reference page to indicate that. Now we're going to talk about Part 1, the position paper. In-depth description of the topic and summary defining the issue. So that's kind of like your literature review. So if we're talking about attendance, you want to define what is attendance, describe attendance, what is chronic absenteeism, what populations may particularly have attendance issues, like we may not think, but pre-K students have a lot of attendance issues, not just high school students. Or students who have medical issues may be considered to have attendance issues. So you want to kind of define it, and give an in-depth description of what it is and at what level does a student tend to have an attendance issue, what may be the requirement, the policy for that particular district or state. The governmental issue. Like in New Jersey, if a student misses 21 days, that is a problem. They may fail for the year. However, there's a threshold if they miss 8 days where certain factors may begin to kick in, where at what time they may go to court. So when you think about that, okay? So an in-depth description of the topic and summary defining the issue. The second part, description of current and relevant research on a topic. So what has been said about the particular topic? Again, that goes into, if we're talking about absenteeism, what is out there? What are people talking about it? Or are people talking about attendance issues? What may be the factors? Is it transportation? All of those different things. If it's medical issues, you have to think about. Description of how the issue impacts education. So if we're talking about attendance, the person or the individual is missing instruction. So it definitely impacts their education, where they are not learning if they're not showing up for class. So that's very impactful, and it can be very consequential and detrimental. Specify effects on individuals, groups, and or communities. So if someone is not educated, it has a domino effect on the community, right? Where someone who may not know how to read, they may be illiterate. Can they really get a job? Can they be successful in school? What are the consequential factors also later in life, not just in the school setting? Identify what tier the student falls in before and after the intervention. There is a YouTube video under Module 9 about the tier. So you look at what tier level that they may be in prior to the intervention and after the intervention. Select an evidence-based intervention for the issue or topic, and you want to include citations. So again, that comes from your literature review. What intervention? If we're talking about attendance, if a student may be homeless or they may not live far, we want to maybe address it through transportation. Maybe you want to give them bus tickets or set up some type of service. It could be the district may have buses. So how can we address that issue when you think about that? And you look at what is the literature saying that has been proven, that has demonstrated effectiveness to address that issue. That is something that is evidence-based. Describe how you would determine the effectiveness of the intervention. How would you measure it? Again, we go back to attendance. I want to look at that student. I'm going to measure it when the student is increasing, if I want to say coming to school, or decreasing absenteeism. That depends on you, because with that particular issue, it can go either way. But it depends on how I would like to measure it. I may want it to go up, or if I want it to go down in regards to decreasing absenteeism. And how would you gather needed data on targeted issue? We're talking about attendance, I can look at academic records. If we're talking about a high school student, I can still maybe look in a system, or I can touch base with particular teachers if they're coming to school late, or if they are cutting classes, if you're looking at intervention. So that's part one of the position paper with doing a response to intervention assignment. You're going to do an in-depth description of the topic and summary defining the issue, which is a literature review, which is where you gather your information on what the professionals have said about the particular issue. You're going to description of current and relevant research on the topic, description of how the issue impacts education, specify effects on individuals, groups, and or communities. Okay, so you want to look at something that is measurable. Identify what tier the student falls in before and after the intervention. Select an evidence-based intervention for the issue or topic. You must have citations. So it's not something that you're just making up or kind of pulling out of the air to address the issue. Describe how you would determine the effectiveness of the intervention. How are you going to measure it? It could be different for everyone, even though you may have the same topic, but it's how are you going to measure it? And how would you gather needed data on a targeted issue? Are you going to observe the student? That could be another way to gather information. Okay, so that's part one of the position paper. Part two is the RTI graph evidence-based intervention. So under module 9, there is a paper there an article there written on how you can do it. Also, there is a YouTube video that you can go on how you can create a chart or a graph in Excel, in Microsoft Excel, which is the best way. So this is part two. It says each student will provide a graph that shows how the identified evidence-based intervention will be monitored and evaluated to ensure successful outcomes for the student. Remember, this is something fictitious that you can do unless you did some actual work with a particular student in a school setting. Okay, so if we're talking about attendance, what did you do? And you will graph it, how you did that. The graph can display fictitious data about the targeted client, showing how the RTI process will be utilized in monitoring academic and behavioral success of that student. So remember, whatever you choose to do, it has to be measurable. You have to be able to measure it, and you have to be able to measure your intervention to determine the effectiveness of it. Also, remember that you want to see if your intervention is working by viewing a graphic display. Again, depending on how I define attendance or absenteeism. So if I'm talking about attendance, I want that to increase. So I would like to see an upward trajectory. If I'm talking about absenteeism, I want that to go down. So I would like to see a regressive trajectory. It depends on how you define your issue. All axes should be labeled appropriately, and there should be a title on your graph. the title of what are you doing? If you're doing attendance, it should say that. It may be your client name, first name. An article that explains how to use Excel to format a graph and appropriately label all parts of the graph can be found in Canvas. That is there. And also there is a YouTube video. So I just want to kind of run through again on what you're doing. You're looking to find a topic that's measurable. You're going to do a literature review, which is something to help you support your particular topic. What are the professionals out there saying? You're also going to look for evidence-based interventions, which is something that has been proven that helps you learn to determine the effectiveness of how it would work in your setting. So that's why you do a literature review. And you're going to talk about it. You're going to define it for this particular your issue that you're looking at. You're going to also say what tier it falls into. So the paper is to be no more than 8 pages. That is not including your reference page or your graph or any other handouts you have that are supporting it. So it's going to be double spaced with a 12-point font when you do that. And remember, you may, as you're doing a paper, as you're writing the paper, you see something, you may want to read some things out loud to yourself so you can get an idea on how it may sound. And make sure when you write, you're writing in an objective way. Although it's something subjective that you've chosen. And remember, the reader is like a blank slate. So they may not know you're educating them on this topic. So ensure that, you're conveying your thoughts clearly. And also there is a writing lab that you may use, So when you think about different things that you would like to do on a topic. So remember, it has to be something that is measurable. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My number is located there, and talk to you later.